All right, I think we can go ahead and get started. Is everyone good to go? Fantastic. All right, well, everyone who has joined already, thank you so much for being on this, I think it's Monday night. So today we're going to talk all about engaging youth in Oklahoma and youth civic participation, how it looks like now, how we can improve it, involving all different types of people, different ages, different backgrounds. And so if you don't know us, we're Voters of Tomorrow Oklahoma. We're the Oklahoma state chapter of the main National Voters of Tomorrow organization. And our main focus is empowering youth to be more involved in politics and to register to vote and vote. So I'm going to now pass it on to my fellow executive board member, Bianca, to introduce herself. Oh, if I didn't mention already, I'm Delnaz Kazemi. I'm the state lead. And I'll let Bianca introduce herself and then introduce the panelists, or have the panelists introduce themselves and open with our first question.
Great. Hi there. My name is Bianca Caves. I am the Legislative and Political Director for VOT Oklahoma. So nice to have all you guys joining us tonight. I'll just send it down the line to our panelists. Whoever wants to go first, whoever's feeling so compelled, I won't put anybody on the spot to be our first go ahead.
May I suggest we do alphabetical order, which will give me time to prepare my introduction?
Absolutely, go for it.
Well, then I'm going to call on John Croissant first.
I think that's how it works, yes. So I am John Croissant, and like John Waldron, I was a teacher for 16 years in the classroom, as well as Gina Nelson. So we've got some fellow educators that are here that turned politicians that are trying to change things here in Oklahoma. Currently, I'm on the Tulsa School Board, and I'm excited to be running for U.S. Congress in CD1 against Kevin Hearn, and making sure that we, and in my campaign as well, make sure we're really listening to all voters and representing every Oklahoman, especially those that are younger and have been left behind in many other elections and by our elected officials we have now. I guess we're going to we should have started with Senator Boren, actually.
Yeah.
So, and I see what you did there. Senator Boren, you want to go next?
Well, I hope everybody can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes, all
Okay.
good.
Okay, good. I was trying to switch over to my laptop and couldn't get it to work, so that's why I was going back and forth, popping in and out. I'm State Senator Mary Boren from Norman, Oklahoma, Senate District 16. I was elected in 2018, and young people and young voters were the key to my election strategy. I had high school students registering voters and knocking doors and writing fundraiser letters and responding to social media responses. So I believe that we have got to get new voters voting in order to get a different outcome. So I'm excited about what you all are doing, and I'm more than willing to help and support you in any way that I can.
I think that makes Gina next on our list.
Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Gina Nelson. I am a congressional candidate for Congressional District 5. I'll be running against Stephanie Bice. I am a former Teacher of the Year, and John was so very kind to say there are a lot of teachers. I was the 2020 Oklahoma Teacher of the Year. I have been a corporate leader trainer in a Fortune 500 company and a nonprofit leader that deals with opioid and stimulant prevention, suicide prevention, and strengthening families. And I appreciate all of you so much. I run because I, as a teacher, stood in the presence of perpetual hope every single day in my classroom. And I know that that is something we need to uphold right now, because we've not really left a great world for all of you. And so I'm running to try and make amends for you.
Just a reminder for our audience, if you could please mute, that would be wonderful. Thank you. And I think Ryan will be next.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ryan. I am the president of the Cleveland County Young Dems. I also serve on the statewide executive board for the Young Democrats of Oklahoma. I am the previous president for the College Democrats of Oklahoma. And now I work as a political consultant on different campaigns. I have worked on state house races, city council races, a state question race before, all very, very fun work. And I am really, really passionate about getting young people involved and registered to vote because my background is field. So reaching voters, getting volunteers, all that stuff is right up my alley. So I'm going to pass it on to who should be next in this.
Yeah.
I think it's Thomas.
Yes. Hi, guys. Well, thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here. My name's Thomas Suarez. I'm a high school student at Mount St. Mary. I serve on Oklahoma City's Youth Council. I'm a policy debate state champion. I'm on the League of United Latin American Citizens, and I'm really passionate about making sure that we can strengthen Oklahoma's education and making sure that young people can get more involved. So that's pretty much about me. I'll pass it on to Representative Waldron.
All right. Well, I'm State Representative John Waldron, also a former high school social studies teacher. I'm a state representative from District 77. I'm a big Gina Nelson fan. Let's see, and I am the chairman of the Oklahoma Democratic Party. I ran for office in 2018, and actually initially before that on a failed run in 2016, because I believed every kid deserved access to a good public school and that Oklahoma had frankly been falling down on its responsibilities pretty much ever since the Republicans took control of the government. And I've been fighting the good fight ever since. I was elected chairman of the state party last June. And I'm committed to making the Oklahoma Democratic Party a statewide party again, so that people all over the state, and not just in blue districts, have choices in the general elections. And that includes young people. For too long, we have contested only a fraction of the seats available. I mean to encourage candidates all across the state so that all the voters, including the young voters, really get a choice on Election Day, November 2026.
Fantastic. Thank you all very much for your great introductions. Very happy to have you all on. I'm going to start with the first question, and this is directed to Ryan and Thomas. And that question is, what are the biggest misconceptions politicians or other leaders in the field have about young voters or young people interested in politics who are not yet of voting age?
Ryan, you can go ahead and go first if you like.
I was about to say you can go ahead and take this one, but I can take it. So in the time that I've been like involved in the political realm, there's been a lot of misconceptions about like young people, the way in which we vote, how active we are when voting. And to be fair, like those misconceptions are grounded in some truth. Young people are not very reliable voters. Young people tend to vote for disruptive candidates. Young people tend to have preferences that right now are like very populist, very anti-establishment. What I will say is one of the biggest misconceptions I have kind of come across is that young people don't want bipartisanship. I think very specifically in Oklahoma, something I have discovered is a lot of young people I talk to who are so burnt out of like polarization and everything want to see more partisanship. A lot of us who are young people here have friends who are Republicans. So it's that kind of thing of like, it's really hard for a lot of people to be able to get fully on board with like a party because they're afraid that they're going to have to like turn their back on people who are their friends and neighbors. So I think that's one common misconception about young people is that they're very like extremist and partisan and just don't want any cooperation between the parties. I think where people run afoul is a lot of young people want authenticity and don't want their values to be betrayed. So that's a little bit harder of a balancing act to deal with when it comes to those interactions.
I think to add on that, part of it is part of the misconception is that a lot of candidates think when they talk to us, we know what they're talking about. Like when they use big words like oligarchy or things like that. A lot of the times, to be completely honest, like my half of my senior class can't tell you what oligarchy means. And so I think candidates need to do a better job of not necessarily treating us like we're stupid, but making sure that the message is getting clear to us and that we're understanding what you guys are fighting for, and what when it comes to policy. Because if you're able to explain policy correctly, and what you want to implement and what you want to do, I think voters are going to understand, especially young voters who, like Ryan pointed out, want bipartisanship and want actual change. Another thing that a lot of candidates try to do is be hip or pretend to be cool. I think, like Ryan pointed out, we want more people who are genuine, people who are honest, and not so much people who keep up with our trends. And so together, I think that makes candidates who young people want to vote for.
Thank you. All right, our next question is going to be directed towards Senator Boren and Representative Waldron. So in your opinion, do you believe that low youth civic engagement is a participation issue or a representation issue?
First of all, I want to say in response to Thomas's point on authenticity that I am hip to your groove. Um, so representation does matter. And when you see young people get involved in politics, that really makes a difference. As a high school teacher, I saw that sometimes the best learning students engaged in was when they talked to each other, when they were the voices and they were at the center of the conversation. And we need more of that. But it is a chicken and egg question. Without young people to come forward and be involved, how do we draw more young people in? And if how are we going to get youth involvement if we don't have leaders? And how do you get those leaders out there in the first place? So yeah, I think authenticity is important. You need to, I need as a representative to be true to myself. Public school teacher, you heard my message. Every kid should have access to good public schools. That's the whole message. But young people have a big responsibility here. You want us to represent your values. You want us to be authentic and to speak to the things that are important to you. But if you aren't talking to us, how do we find that out? And the answer is that I think one answer is that politicians need to go into a lot of different spaces. They need to be out there listening to people and hearing messages that they wouldn't get otherwise, which is why I like to listen to you, Bianca and Delnaz and Thomas. I've even survived a panel discussion with you, and you throw ideas out in gale force wind, and I always learn something when I'm in your company. I guess I'll close by saying that when I was a teacher, I realized that students were my most important resource because they could tell you what it was that they needed. So I guess as a politician, maybe we should not always talk, we should listen.
Senator Bourne, I think you're muted.
Yes, I was. I'm sorry. My dogs were barking.
Don't worry.
So if we're going to stick with the binary question of this or that, which I try to usually wiggle out of those kinds of questions, but they do have a purpose for clarifying the different influences or how different factors impact voter engagement. I would lean towards, I think we have a participation problem because I believe that that's how you get representation. If you deal with the participation issue, then young people see their friends involved and then they see a pathway and they start getting engaged. And that was the strategy in my campaign as I had newly high school graduated students. Some were still juniors and seniors in high school. And I introduced them to the League of Women Voters, and they had a crosstown clash voter registration battle where Norman North and Norman High competed to see who could register the most voters, and we had them announce it at the football game of who won the voter registration battle. And the students had my t-shirts on, and other students saw what I was, that they were invited to participate, and then that caused I think more representation to happen. And I do believe that the traditional campaign mechanisms of um, flyers and mailers and fundraising really leaves young people out of the mix, and you have to create opportunities to train and empower and equip young people to have a job and have a role. And I really do believe that that's the responsibility of the campaign and the candidate, to be very, very proactive in creating those opportunities. And it doesn't take, you don't have to get every high school student in your whole district to participate. If you find the influencers and leaders and you give them a job and you give them a responsibility, then the word will get out. And I mean, I had so many students that followed me because of their friends being involved in my campaign. So I just think that we as candidates and campaign partisan leaders really need to be trained better about how to fully utilize young people, all the different roles that young people are ready to do, and how to mentor and train and equip, and not just throw them out in the pond and expect them to figure it out. But once you really train them, then I mean, they'll, the other thing that I also think that for candidates that's totally under appreciated. But one of the reasons why I was so aggressive about making sure that young people around me is I knew their energy level was higher than mine. And so if we were supposed to go knock doors at 9 o'clock on a Saturday, and then I'm sitting there at 7:45 on a Saturday, I knew that those seniors in high school and freshmen in college were going to be knocking on my door in an hour and 15 minutes. So it made me stay, geared up to know that I was accountable to them. I also was less snarky and less negative and trolling, and all the stuff that does when once you've been through politics, you kind of get jaded and your energy and vibe kind of gets like, meh, nobody, you just kind of get real mediocre about it. But when you have young people around you, you really check yourself, and you want to, what I think that politicians that are older really take seriously is passing the torch to the next generation. And it really makes us stay on our accountability game, and it makes us stay fresh, it makes us stay energized, and it makes us stay accountable. So I would say it's almost essential in order for you to have a really invigorated campaign that's in it for the long run, is really give young people a job in your campaign, and they'll show up and they'll get out there with you, and before you know it, you're fun, you've knocked 100 doors because you had a lot of young people around you.
Thank you both for beautifully answering that difficult question, because it is really hard to pick one or the other. Before I go on to my next question, I just wanted to make sure I get the pronunciation right. It is John Crescent, correct?
That's correct.
Amazing. So the next question is for John Crescent and Gina Nelson, and that question is, how can candidates earn youth support in meaningful ways?
Okay. Gina, would you like to go first?
Sure. Start out and we can switch around. That's just fine. So I think there's two ways that we earn support. And I think that, Senator Boren kind of hit on it, of course, of talking about having them engaged. So I can say on my campaign, we have a ton of young people that are involved. We have a college fellows program where we have matched college folks up with our campaign advisors and managers, deputy finance committee, so that not only are they volunteering, but they are learning the process, which obviously as a former teacher, that's very important for me to teach the next generation, so that we have people who are involved in this process. And then I look at our volunteers. So I have a ton of high school, all the way down to 13-year-olds. 13-year-olds are knocking doors for me right now because they're fired up and they want to see that change. And so I think that that's part of it, is that if you open them the door and get them involved and let them lead, they will do everything they can. The second part is that we as politicians have to stop assuming that we can just get your vote. And because we are just the antithesis, or I'm sorry, Thomas, we are not the ones that are just saying that we're against something, or the other person's against something. We have to give you something to vote for. And so making sure that our platform aligns not only with our values, but the values for the future. So making sure that, yes, when we're talking about healthcare, we're not just talking about Medicaid and Medicaid, Social Security, those things that you may not be thinking about, but your right to healthcare right now, and making sure that you are all taken care of, or making sure that you have a good education, which means investing in those teachers, or making sure that we are keeping things like AI in check. We have to make sure that our issues are balanced, not only for the world that we live in, but the world that is yet to come.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we've said a lot of this already. And for me, I let, basically a group of 19 to 26-year-olds run my campaign. Obviously myself and my campaign manager, we're a little older, but the majority of my campaign is run by either freshmen in college up to people that have just graduated a few years ago. And most of my students that I taught at Edison are in their 20s into their 30s now. And so I try to make sure that not only are they working and volunteering in the campaign, but they're actually running the campaign. They're leading and messaging, and I'm listening to them. The other part of it is that in order to engage them, because I'm getting people that come to me every single day, every single week, that want to get involved because they're the ones creating my social media. They're the ones that are helping me with my TikToks and my Instagram posts that, are getting hundreds of thousands of views. Well, they're doing that because not only, I'm a sixth grade teacher at heart. So I communicate at a sixth grade level. That's just kind of how I am. But it's also like being authentic to myself, but it's also making sure that I'm communicating in a way that speaks to them and their media. And by doing that and being authentic and just being who I am, that allows them to step in. And we may not agree on everything. I may be a little bit more moderate than some of my democratic socialist supporters are, but we have great conversations, and we make sure that they know that they're welcome and that criticism is welcome. If you just say, this is my way and you need to listen to me, you're not going to get any young voter to want to join your campaign. So it's give them the voice. And then number two, just make sure that you're being honest to who you are, and it's okay to have differences, because I think that's how, as Democrats in Oklahoma, we're going to help bring people back into the Democratic tent in 2026 and going forward.
Thank you so much. Yeah, open-minded, truthful conversation is so important. All right, my next question is headed back to Thomas. So kind of staying with our accessibility trend of our questions, how do you believe that voting can be made more accessible for first-time and student voters?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I'm going to be honest, registering to vote was one of the easiest things I've ever done. I think some of our math assignments are harder than registering to vote. And so I think it's accessible. People my age were always on our phone. And doing it is actually really easy. I think the difficult part, or what makes it seem hard to access, is people knowing like how to do it. I had people ask me, Well, I was like, "Oh, I already got registered to vote." And they were like, "Really? How do you even do that?" And it's so easy. You just go online and fill out a couple of things and you're registered to vote. So I think what's more important, because it is pretty accessible, is to teach and to educate and to kind of ensure that all the kids know, yeah, it's pretty easy to vote. You just go onto the website and put in your information. I think another thing is, I think our society, and it's not just with young people, but in general, people have normalized not voting. Um, and I think that's a big problem. I think we see a lot of leaders in Washington, D.C., who shouldn't be there because we've normalized not voting. And so that's translated. Parents translate that to their kids. They don't talk to their kids about politics. And so we get a young generation that just doesn't vote. And so I think we need to turn the table a little bit and like make it really important and really pound on the aspect that voting should is something that we all need to be doing. And we need to normalize voting, and we need to make sure that not voting is not normalized. That can be in the classroom, having all of our history teachers get up and say, "Hey, you can log on to this website and register to vote. It's not difficult." Um, and I know a lot of Republicans are really concerned that teachers are indoctrinating students or anything like that, which is pretty absurd. But I think having a teacher, no matter what political affiliation, talk to a student, whatever political affiliation, and just telling them that, hey, it's really easy to vote. You just go on this website, can really increase those numbers of youth participation.
I really like what you said about how we need to normalize voting rather than what it is now, which is that the norm is not voting. Because I agree, when I was in high school, even my friends who were so concerned and we were always talking about these issues, it was like the hardest thing to get them to register, and I can never let go of that. My next question is for Ryan and Gina. However, anyone else who wants to jump in at the end, please do. And that is, what investments should Oklahoma be making in civic education, and where are the gaps? So this flows very nicely from Thomas's comments about education.
Do you want to go first, Gina, or do you want me?
Go right ahead, please.
Sorry, you cut out. I said I didn't hear you. Oh, okay. So investments that Oklahoma could be making in civic education, the answer is all of them. There is a desperate need for investments to be made in civic education. I think the two largest things really that do scare me is Oklahoma history is there's some great programs out there, just saying for all the teachers who are here. Oklahoma history in a lot of schools is taught well, in a lot of schools it's not. There are like things about just our history about things that have happened that a lot of students don't know about. I have friends who are unaware of the Tulsa Race Massacre, and one that stuns me, being like a history nerd, but also too, I think it kind of informs a lot of the gaps in civic education we're dealing with, because it's hard to know where a lot of the decisions that are being made are coming from when you don't know the history of how we got here. So like I, for my senior research thesis, did a whole history of like Oklahoma transitioning from a Democrat majority state to Republican majority state. It's very obvious that like the state of our political situation was decades in the making. But all of that kind of gets lost because in a very like post Trump, post disruption, like breaking down of political norms, we're very focused on like what is the immediate reasons for like what is going on. So a lot of that history does get lost civically. Also, I do think that just pushing voter registration it's pretty poor at the high school level. I and also teachers are too afraid to talk about like what the difference is between parties on even just on a superficial level, because I've had three friends now who registered as a libertarian because they thought that meant the same thing as a liberal. And I think that shows, and I've had students at the college I went to ask me, what's the difference between a Republican and a Democrat? So I think there are ways to for teachers to be able to discuss like there are differences between the parties without it necessarily being partisan or pushing an agenda of some sort. I just think there's a fundamental lack of education. And I also think that starts in the home with a lot of parents not prioritizing civic education and passing that on to their kids. So that's my answer so far.
I'm going to slip in for a second since you mentioned the Tulsa Race Massacre. It must be mentioned that 3 hours ago, Mayor Monroe Nichols posted that Madam Viola Fletcher, one of the last two survivors of the Tulsa Race Massacre, passed away today at the age of 111.
Thank you for bringing that up. It's very important. And similar to what Ryan said, I just wanted to do a comment as well. Apologies, Miss Nelson. I remember my history teacher in middle school. She was wonderful. We had a small unit on the Tulsa Race Massacre. And I remember she was telling us, I am so sorry, I can barely fit in anything, but I think you guys should really know this. And that really stuck with me. It just, it shocked me that it wasn't built into the curriculum as much as it should be. And she did it on her own time and using her own resources. I just want to put that out there. And this was 5, 6 years ago. No, but more actually, maybe 7 or 8.
Sure, absolutely. So I'm gonna say a little bit about education when it comes to public education, but then I'm gonna talk about the civic education when it comes to outside, because we can't lay everything at public education's feet. And I'm going to explain why. So first, why is that when you are looking at the standards, of course, you're going to hit in middle school. You talk about the 3 branches of government. And of course, Mr. Waldron here, Representative Waldron, he also knows that that is covered in that section. And then we take a long pause and until you're a senior, and then you have government class, which is a 1 semester thing that you're going to be taught. And so then the legislature has put then the requirement for you to pass a basic civics test as well, which by the way, it hasn't been updated because my friends are saying that the things have already, they're from the past. But with saying that, is that yes, we can put that on the teachers and give them enough time, but with the way that the standards are written, you go middle school and then nothing senior year. And then we're expecting them to remember this. We're expecting all of you young people to remember all how this works. So that's where it brings me, is that we need civic education to go beyond the classroom. And we need to have active organizations working around the state to educate, to advocate, and to activate. And so what I mean by that is to, yes, let's break down those branches of government. Let's break down actually what the different positions are that people can run for, whether you're, the court clerk, or you are running for a legislature or school board. We need to have a better definition of what the government is and what they do. And then we advocate, of course, for voter registration, getting involved. And then we activate, which means we get people to run and we get people to show up for the polls. So that, I think, is very important, that we look at this in 2 ways. Yes, start them young in public education. But folks, the fact is that the day after the 2024 election, 2 days after, the most Googled thing in the entire state of Oklahoma is, what is a tariff and can I take my vote back? And then just a couple weeks ago, we had people calling the election board asking why they could not show up and vote for New York's mayor. We have to do a better job of doing education beyond the classroom walls.
I'd like to, first of all, secondly, Landon was a page in the legislature. Ryan, you interned for with the House Democrats once, and some of you all might have experience there. One question I frequently ask the pages who come from all over the state is, what social studies class are you taking right now? And they're mostly juniors and seniors, and very few of them are taking a social studies class, because you can take U.S. government and Oklahoma history in your freshman year, U.S. history in your sophomore year, and then you're done. We are teaching students AP US government as a freshman one semester class when it should be a full year senior class. We simply don't prioritize it in our instruction. The other thing, to come back to my own experience, is that students need to be involved in discussion. Don't lecture to kids about civics. Make them do a mock Continental Congress. Make them handle the Shelby County versus Holder Supreme Court case. Interactions, simulations. Let students hash out the issues for themselves. If you do that, it's not only fun and engaging, it's educational. And you young people will be giving us cynical old politicians a run for our money, because all of a sudden you'll know what our responsibilities are and you'll be able to hold us to account.
I want to add on to Gina's point, which talked about how the transition from middle school and senior year. I think I have seen that. The last time I remember talking about government was second grade. Third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade were just basic history. And then I remember my middle school years was either European history or American history, and same thing for freshman through senior year. And so what happens is my classmates forget, obviously, what they learned in second grade. And then they don't know kind of what's going on when they go to either that AP government class or their class in one semester. And I'm taking AP government, but I just think it's impossible to learn what you're supposed to learn in a semester, which is what the standard is. And so I think it is a problem that my generation is not voting, and it's a problem that my generation is uneducated, but we have to look at why that's happening. And part of it is those standards, and part of it is the legislature. And I think not only do young people have to hold them accountable, we don't know how to hold them accountable because we don't know how the government works. And so we need our parents and the older generations who can hold them accountable to hold them accountable.
And I think it's also intentional as a social studies teacher. I mean, I think it's intentional that we're trying to keep people from voting as well, and to try to change the curriculum, like with Ryan Walters, so that it's trying to say, oh, too many young people are Democrats. They're more liberal when they go to college. So let's make sure we change the curriculum. Let's go after teachers with the CRT. They're afraid to teach and to have tough discussions, and to let students be the ones to decide what their beliefs are instead of telling them what their beliefs are. And so I think you've got to have tough discussions. I think you've got to allow students to be able to think for themselves and to see bias. And I think that's the other thing that's not being taught. And even in sixth grade geography, we're Western Hemisphere, I was teaching principles of US government and Canada and Mexico and Central America and South America. Again, it's having these discussions about different religions, different governments, different cultures, and making sure that kids understand that diversity is good, and that we have to have different opinions are okay. That it doesn't have to just be one is correct, and to be able to see the bias that people are pushing, especially in social media and the media today. But again, that's just a little bit of my perspective on it.
And I think that brings up a good point, because I see like the bias is obviously there, right? And so what's happening is I see it in my own classroom. We see the bias of the Republican Party, we see the bias of the Democratic Party, and then young people see, oh no, bias is bad, so I'm not going to vote. I'm not going to get engaged. I'm just gonna stay away from politics. And I think that's very dangerous, because what happens is that then the bias keeps moving in and moving in and moving in, and our entire political system and politics in society as a whole becomes more about divisiveness. And so I think it's important that we teach our kids that yes, it's bias, but understanding and recognizing the lesser of two evils, or picking just because someone and or something is biased doesn't mean you have to stay away from it. Because in the end, indifference is even more of a major problem than picking a side.
Before we move on to the next question, I just wanted to make two comments. I really like what you said, Thomas, and John Croissant, about how we should teach students not to be so scared of bias. When I talk to kids about media literacy, I also say that, just because a source is biased doesn't mean you have to run away from it. Most of them are. Most news outlets are, but it's just you have to be aware of it and know how to interpret it. And then my mind went back to this in the very beginning. I don't remember who it was, apologies, but someone said some people get taught history and government very well in Oklahoma and some don't. It may have been Ryan, I may be wrong. And it just took me back to my fifth grade history class. Thomas, you said you had some teaching in second grade and then nothing since then. And then I remember my fifth grade class, we even made a tree that showed the branches of government, and it just got like drilled into my head. In fact, we still have it hanging up in my parents' closet for some reason. And so when I, went through the years and got to high school, obviously my own interest is in politics, but that foundation helped me so much when we got to the nitty gritty of the structures. And then I had some classmates who were wanting to learn and were interested and thought it was a fascinating subject, but they really struggled because of the lack of that foundation. So it is interesting kind of going back and reflecting. And I'm going to pass that on to Bianca for the next question.
Yeah, so before we have our next question, I want to give Representative Jared Deck an opportunity to introduce himself as he's just joined us.
Hi, everyone. As she said, Representative Jared Deck. I represent House District 44 in Core Norman, Oklahoma, which includes the main campus of the University of Oklahoma, as well as Campus Corner in downtown Norman. My background is sort of a jack of all trades. I'm in the music and entertainment industry, but I've also been a brick and mortar business owner as well. But also, I have a pretty extensive background in on the ground organizing, from political campaigns, ballot initiatives, municipal and school bonds, etc.
All right, thank you so much for that info about your background. All right, so our next question actually does go to you, Representative Deck, but also towards Senator Boren and Representative Waldron. So our next question is, what can legislators actively do this session to expand youth democratic participation?
Well, I think maybe, but why don't you cue us one at a time for these questions? I've got my mic on, so I'll go first. Well, I mean, I think we need to be in more spaces. This one is very helpful, and I hope the messages we have here travel. We also have to be in different mediums and attitudes. I think we need to be able to speak to young people directly about the things that matter to them. There's a lot on the ballot. Probably the biggest thing we need to talk about is that the ladder of success in American society is missing a few rungs. And the ones it's missing are the ones at the bottom, where young people are. So we're undermining public education. We're creating barriers to go to college. We're preventing an increase in the minimum wage. And we're taking things out of the social safety net that help families with young people in them. And that has been happening for a long time. So that might feel like this is just the way things are, but these are the results of conscious choices that mean that your generation is much less likely than my generation. I'm a Gen Xer to achieve the social and material well-being of the previous generation, the boomers. So if we are making conscious policy choices that are going to make your lives harder, that are frustrating your avenues of ambition and prosperity, then I think you guys should be paying attention, and we as politicians should be having conversations about that. It's not just broad messages about how you kids are the future. We are trying to. The system is taking away your future. It's endangering your present. And if you're unhappy about a lot of things about the way a lot of things are in society today, well, then I think it's time for you to get engaged and get involved. I think I'll leave it at that and pass it to Senator Boren.
Okay, thank you. I love that answer. The way I understand that question that you just gave was that how during a legislative session can young people get involved? And one thing that I think is really helpful is trainings. Um, I know a lot of any citizen, whether regardless of age, might care about a particular issue. They may care about the energy, or they may care about student loan debt, or some other. They usually come with a problem that they think needs to be solved. So I think we could do a better job of reaching out to young people and having training so that they know how to follow a bill through the process. And so that they also know how to talk to legislators about what they care about. Lobbyists do that every day. It's a skill set that they have every day. They talk to lawmakers every day. They make sure the bills that they care about is moving through the system. And all of those skills are skills that can be easily taught through one or two trainings. And I think we also, and I offered to do that to some students at OU. I just spoke to them about energy. And another thing I did, I said, if any of you all want to come to the Capitol and watch a committee meeting, you can come. And so my follow up to that with them is to send them, their professors and those students, a list of the committee meetings. I care about energy, so there's only 6 committee meetings, maybe 8, in a legislative session, and they last about 2 hours. So following those online or coming up to the Capitol and seeing those, they can see it, and then being accessible to answer questions about how things are working. But I think what's most important, and I've seen this through the turnpike issue and other issues. I had some people come up to my office. They were not young, they were older ladies, and they were so concerned about PFAS and plastics, microplastics. And they were really, really concerned about that. And my questions to them were, do you have bill language? Who's on your side? Who are you working with? What legislators do you think could carry this? Because you've got my vote. I don't care what the bill is, bring it to me and I'll author it. But you're going to need, 25 votes on the Senate side, and you're going to need 50 something votes over on the House side. So how are you going to get to there? And I think that's the other thing that we can do as legislators is when we invite young people in is to equip them with the different skill sets along the way, going from I'm interested in this particular policy issue all the way to joining groups that come up and talk to legislators on a weekly, daily basis in writing or face to face or by phone or by digitally, to watch their issue progress through the session, because you learn so much even when you don't get what you want. Sometimes these things takes 3 to 4 years to culminate into legislative change, but there's a lot of other change that can happen too. And if they're actively engaged around a particular policy issue, then it gives us a chance to teach the different uh, mechanisms, the apparatus, and how it's basically like driving a car. This is the blinker, this is the gear shift, this is the windshield wipers, and we can do that with being engaged in policy change. Is but it's learned a lot of times in real time. It's not something that you can just read about. Yeah, it's a show and tell, constantly show and tell, experientially learned. But we need to invite young people into that space so that they can learn those things.
Yeah, I'll mention just a couple of quick things. Number one, the Capitol House Representatives and the Senate both have an internship program that can be applied for. I've had interns in my office. I usually task them with, reading bill language to see what I missed out on, helping me create questions for committee work. Maybe see something that I didn't see from a particular angle that I didn't catch. But not only can you go through the Capital program, I know that at the University of Oklahoma, we have a Capital Scholars program that really allows for that pathway for an internship at the Capitol. But also, legislative offices can take on interns outside of that process. We can do that independently. So I'd say number one, trying to find an internship within the Capitol. Second of all, there are a lot of advocacy groups that have legislative days and legislative training. I serve on the board of the ACLU of Oklahoma. We have advocacy days and training. We have a bill tracker that our staff manages, and they have certain bills that they watch on a daily basis. They give updates for, and whenever one of those bills is coming up in committee, they also send out alerts. And being able to activate through an advocacy organization like that, and they'll have advocacy days where they'll train people to go speak with legislators and then actually send them off into those offices to discuss a particular bill or issue that's on the table. And then I think the other thing, the other way is finding that issue, right? About this time, our state agencies are starting to give their appropriations requests, their budget requests to different committees right about now. In December, the State Board of Equalization will tell us how much money we have to spend. And within about the next 8 weeks, we're going to learn what the big fights are going to be this coming session. We usually kind of get that information walking into session. And so if you're paying attention, if you're watching what those fights are going to be, you're hearing a lot. I mean, the state chamber just released their own education policy, which I'm sure they're being paid to do by someone. And I think, it's really on us to watch for these things, find something you're passionate about and get involved. Oklahoma Policy Institute is another advocacy organization that does an excellent job. And they also do training and prepare people to go talk to legislators at the Capitol. But the biggest thing is understanding, and I know it's not easy and it's not the same for everyone. The Capitol is like the state Capitol. It is a big fancy building, but but for those of us who work there, it's just an office building, and we all just work there. And I see the same people every day, and I see different people every day. There are people there who I enjoy seeing and going to work with, whether I agree with them or not. And then there are people who I wish worked somewhere else. But it truly is just like any other office building. Once you get past that initial kind of shock and awe of walking in and seeing all the marble and the large paintings, but just understanding that really we all just go to work. We're humans, and I tell people this all the time. We listen to the people who talk to us. So come talk to us.
I'd love to hear that. Yeah, the Capitol should be an accessible place for anyone who wants to make their voice heard. I love that you emphasize that. All right, we're going to take a question from the chat now. It's actually two questions, one that's directed to our political leaders and then one that's directed to us moderators. So we'll start with your political leaders to give the moderators a minute to think. So the question is, what is one action that you would like to see from the Voters of Tomorrow group coming out of this discussion to help support the gaps that we've been discussing?
I guess I could jump in on that. I would say that connect young people with campaigns, get them involved. I know the quicker that you can get in and have your voice heard and have somebody listen, it totally changes how things are going. So I've talked to so many young people that they just don't know how anything works, but they want to see change. Well, when you get onto a campaign, that gives you an opportunity to not just get your voice heard, but actually impact what's happening in your community. And so if you can get people connected to campaigns, to volunteer, to work on a campaign in some aspect, I think that would be great.
And I'll add to that, our campaign infrastructure here in Oklahoma is much slimmer than you might think. We need all the help we can get. We're consistently trying to build a bench. Most folks last working on campaigns about half of a cycle. Like they don't even necessarily last through the entire campaign. I had a conversation with Ryan the other day about how volunteers have a shelf life. And so, they'll work real hard and then they kind of go away. And so we have got to develop more talent on the ground, and we need folks who are willing to do work their tails off to literally, blood, sweat, and tears for this. Because in a place like Oklahoma, folks who think like me, we don't have the privilege of paying a lot of money for a bunch of internships or a bunch of positions. We don't have the privilege of having large campaign staff at our whim, or even a large volunteer base. So we absolutely need more folks getting involved on that ground level.
And to add that, Jared, it's also, there are so many different jobs on a campaign. So you could be a social media person, you could be a phone caller, you can write, messages on a postcard. There are so many, or knocking doors. There's so many things that you, as a young person, can get involved with based on what your talents are. And so one of the things that I do, my campaign, is we kind of listen to what the volunteer wants to do and then put them into a place where they're going to be successful as a part of the team. And so, not just encouraging people to go volunteer, but making sure that they get onto campaigns that want to utilize them in the right way.
Yeah, I think one actionable item that voters of tomorrow, that's the name of your group. I hope I got it right. Yeah. That you all could do is do some trainings, one or two, on how to find a campaign to get involved in, I think is one. And then also just basic skill sets of, I think we all basically, I did a training called How to Talk to Voters. And door knocking is one element of talking to voters, but it's not the only element of talking to voters. And so by doing a How to Talk to Voters campaign training, you could teach your voters of tomorrow how to talk to their friend, how to talk to somebody on the bus, how to talk to somebody at the door on a campaign, how to talk to somebody who's registering voters, how to talk to somebody on the phone, how to do text banking, how to talk to people through postcards or mail, um, how to talk to voters through social media campaigns. So if folks see, because basically that's what all of our campaigns do, is we're talking to voters, because a vote is the currency. That's how you count a win, is a vote. And that's on the scoreboard. And so all of us have vote counts. Gina, what's your vote count for this? How many votes do you need to win? She can tell you. And she can tell you by precinct how many she needs to win. John knows how many votes he needs to win. And so talking to voters is a key component of engaging in democracy, because at the end of the day, because we're not ruled by a king, because we're ruled by votes, it is folks talking to folks. It's just the way it was even back when we first started voting without any digital anything, when it was just horses and no TV and no civics classes and no public education. We didn't even have public education back then. It was people talking to people. And I think when young people realize that they can actually do that, and they have the moral clarity and the moral agency and the responsibility to, and they're successful at it, that I think that unlocks that participation and representation thing. So I would say do some trainings. Like we could all say, I wish more volunteers knew how to fill in the blank. I learned from working with young people that not a lot of young people, I mean, I shouldn't say it this way. I was surprised by how many young people didn't know how to address an envelope, and where to put the stamp, and where to put the return address, and so I had to teach them. So even doing bulk mailing, like we're gonna find somebody that's doing bulk mailing today, and we're gonna help out, or we're gonna do things together. We're gonna help phone bank this weekend. Who wants to join? Find more ways to, and then every time you do an event, train 10 minutes before it, and then they'll be more confident. But then you can also do formal trainings. So that's what I would say. I would encourage you all to do is organize formal trainings. I'll come help. All of us, any of us will show up and help train. I'll do it in person. Um, so I think y'all, convening is what the big fancy word is now for that, is convening. We need y'all to do some convening and inviting us to show up and pass the torch.
I'd like to point out that the Oklahoma Democratic Party staff includes a 16-year-old Nick Hickman who handles comms for us, doing Instagram and TikTok videos. And young people really have power in a time of a technological revolution in communications. Young people understand the technology innately that we older people struggle to learn. So I think one thing I'd really love from Voters of Tomorrow is for you to find us people who can be who can work for us and help us get the message out to young people to reach younger voters where they are. They're not going to come to my 5-paragraph essays on Facebook. So and so if you know what I mean. But yeah, I think young people should be taking the lead. It's just like in the classroom, give them ownership, give them a chance to use their voices. And you know what? I might pay you to do it.
Okay, I will go next. So what I would love to see out of Voters of Tomorrow is, if possible, I know you all have to stick with a national organization, is collaboration with other organizations on college campuses that are trying to accomplish similar goals. Something that I've noticed, because I was previously president of College Democrats of Oklahoma, is there is a lot of collegiate organizations that are trying to like organize students politically in some way. There's Voters of Tomorrow, there's partisan organizations like College Democrats, is Dream for America. And I think what we need is more collaboration from really everyone in the space. And that also applies to outside of collegiate atmospheres. There's a well-known joke that like in progressive nonprofit organizing, there are a bajillion nonprofits all trying to do the same job. That is especially a problem here in Oklahoma City. And then also something I would like to see is we need to push more young people to get involved, whether that is a campaign, whether that is with their local party, whether that is just relational organizing their friends to vote. Because the average age of volunteers that I work with is 55 and up. And I love our 55 and up crowd. They are my hardest workers. They are God's gift to me, but they also are not going to be with us forever, and they're also not going to be physically fit to be knocking doors forever. A lot of these folks are doing what they can because they're passionate about the issues. So I really try to encourage a lot of younger people to volunteer to get up and try to do something, because doom scrolling on TikTok is not going to be what does it for us.
All right, if no one else wants to answer, then we can pivot to the second part of the question, which is directed at the moderators, which is kind of the converse of this first question. Is there an action you'd like to see each of the leaders on the panel take? Delnaz, would you like to go first, or I can go?
I guess I can go first. I've been making some notes. I like to share my anecdotes. I think it was Senator Boren, you mentioned the trainings. Yes, it was. And especially or specifically how to speak to voters. I know I could have benefited from that because the first campaign I worked on, it was in 2020. I remember it was in a Panera Bread where we all met. It was my first time phone banking ever. And they just said, here's the phone. I forgot the software we used. He said, dial the number and you just, there's the script. And I remember I stared at my volunteer coordinator and I was like, what? I was so nervous. But I got thrown in there, I learned, but training would have definitely helped. To get to the question, I was thinking, what could you do? What could we do? But I think what some of the panelists pointed out, and what I agree with, that it's very much a collaboration. Ryan, you mentioned between organizations, yes, and also between us here, panelists or politicians, and ourselves. Um, because a lot of you mentioned us training people and sending them to you guys to so they can learn and you guys can get some great skills. So it's really a two-way thing. So I don't think it's us doing something and the panelists doing something else. It's really us collaborating and working together. I love the idea of trainings. So I will definitely reach out, Senator Bourne, Representative Waldron, and anyone else who's interested in helping us with that. Yeah, so I really think it's a collaboration end of the day. It's really hard to say, the responsibility falls on one or the other. I think it's on both of us. And Representative Waldron, I really do love your 5-paragraph essays on Facebook. So if there's, one person out there who's always reading them, it's me. Bianca, over to you.
Yeah, I think the collaboration aspect is obviously incredibly crucial because there's a lot more security in numbers, and if it's just us, then we can make a lot less of an impact. On that, I will say, we've worked with a lot of you who are on this panel in the past, and so we know obviously you guys are excited about being engaged with youth voters. Members of youth on the panel as well. So I know obviously you guys are excited about getting more youth voters involved and, youth civic leaders who maybe are not able to vote yet. But what I would say is I think we need help reaching those people who are in elected office, who are in leadership positions in our community, who are less eager to engage as you are. We know you guys are excited to engage with us because, you accepted to join the panel. And I think it's like Delnaz said, it's that kind of two-pronged effort. It's not us working on one thing and you working on another. It's us working together. So if you all are able to encourage your colleagues, the people you say you go to work with in the office every day, to feel more engaged with their young constituents and, to work with us, to work with other youth organizations. I think that's how we start to build that community.
Fantastic. Thank you to the audience member who submitted that question. Let me see where I was on my question document. All right. Going on to the questions we have written in advance. This one is directed to Ryan and Thomas. And again, it flows really nicely from what we spoke about. And in fact, it overlaps a bit. So I'm curious to see if you have any different ideas on this. But what role should or can young people play in shaping policy agendas, in addition to just supporting them from the sidelines? As we spoke about, there are so many ways for young people to be involved. I think John Croissant mentioned there are so many jobs, from social media to this to that. But if you have any other ideas on how maybe the average student or young person who's not super deeply interested just yet, how can they get involved in shaping policy?
Yeah, I think that's a good question because yes, young people want to be involved, but we also want to be involved to actually make a change. And so last week I was at the Capitol and the Latino Caucus hosted. It was kind of like a training, but at the same time it was a workshop to tell Latino students how they can make a difference at the Capitol. And so part of it is encouraging each other and encouraging young people to talk to their representatives, talk to their senators, call their legislators, email their legislators on the ideas that they have. I know I'm going to be trying to do that this session. But I feel like it's just encouragement because there are a ton of young people that I know that have great ideas and that can make some positive policy changes. We just have to get out there and let our representatives know that we want change and we have some ideas. So I think it's that. I think also it's important to know that we all have power. A lot of the times people think, oh, I'm young, like it doesn't matter, they won't listen. And while some won't listen and some won't care, a lot of them do. And a lot of them care about what we have to say and what we want to make change. So I think empowering our youth, inspiring them, and also bringing them in is exactly how we can have those policy changes. And also, so I don't forget, I think Representative Waldron mentioned it, but the PAGE program for people my age, juniors and seniors in high school, it's a great way to get to know your representatives, get to know representatives at the Capitol who may not be yours, but who care about the things you care about. It's a wonderful program. I think the Capitol should advertise it a little bit more, but it's a great way to get youth inspired and empowered.
And let's not forget about the Oklahoma Intercollegiate Legislature, OIL, which brings students to the Capitol to have real life simulations of Oklahoma politics. This is a PSA dedicated to the one lifetime member of the Oklahoma Intercollegiate Legislature, Joe Dorman, who today leads the Oklahoma Institute for Child Advocacy. Yeah, find out more about the about OIL and how you can be involved if you're in college, and how you can come sit in the legislative bodies and engage in debates of your own. The best way for you to learn is to participate.
So I was actually going to talk about OIL. So John stole my thunder. But
Never trust
what
a politician.
I know, right? Just kidding. Love you as always. But I will say is for students who are like very politically minded, who have ideas for policy and everything, interning in the legislature. Like when I interned in the legislature, I actually met Representative Waldron way back then. It was such a great learning experience for me. Also, like Oklahoma Intercollegiate Legislature is filled with the biggest policy nerds you are ever going to meet, and they are so passionate, and it is so scary sometimes, but they are also it's such like a room of people who you know are going to change the world. But then I also want to mention like there are for students who maybe are completely outside of politics, who just like want to get very surface level involved in helping shape policy. I mean, simply calling your legislators and like people forget that you can just walk into the Capitol and just talk to people. So like when I was in college Dems, I took my college Dem group up to the Capitol from USAO down in Chickasha, itty bitty college. Nobody ever did anything political there. We went up to the Capitol and spoke to several legislators there. You can do like phone campaigns to call legislators for specific things. So we've also organized against like anti-trans legislation at the Capitol, calling the heads of committees, trying to get it defeated. I think what success we saw very recently was, I believe his name was Tremaine Wood, who was set to be executed, and Governor Stitt waited until like 2 minutes before to grant him clemency in spite of recommendation from the Oklahoma Pardon and Parole Board. And you saw thousands of people making calls to Governor Kevin Stitt's office saying that this man does not deserve to be executed, that nobody deserves to be executed in the state of Oklahoma. And these may not sound like policy agendas in the way we typically think of them, but they are call to actions that do shape policies, because I can tell you every politician here in this room cares about when people are blowing up their phone, wanting something very specific done, and that does shape how they think about policies similar to that in the future. So that would be my recommendation, and I think it's a low investment way to get involved.
Can I jump in and respond to that as well? Okay. Um, I think I have a lot of people that come up to the Capitol and they're common people that really impact legislation that aren't lobbyists. I've seen teachers do that. I've seen the Turnpike folks do that. Um, and I think one thing that I've noticed that people don't necessarily give full, it's a lot of times behind the scene is the power of making a bill better. Like, the anti-trans stuff was, horrific. And sometimes in Oklahoma, we just battled like it's dragon slaying day every day of just wailing away at some really tough, like death penalty and those kinds of things. But if it's not on Fox News and it's not on MS Now, there's a lot of issues up there that a lot of people are trying to make better. Like there's a lot of foster care bills that come through. And I think young people, anything with around child advocacy or kids, you know, trying to, like, you have a lot of kids that are homeless or living in some kind of transitional housing in their junior or senior year, child custody things, divorce. If you read a bill and you look at it, not only like this is awful, I want to kill it, but I think I understand why they're trying to do this, but they're really missing the boat over here, or they're not fully considering a young person's perspective on this particular issue, like plastic bags or bottles or whatever. I think that's a really good opportunity to jump in early on in the policy making process before it's gotten out of committee, and sit down or set up a Zoom with those lawmakers with a friend or two, have one or two pals. Don't, I think it's better if you don't do it by yourself because you can feel intimidated, and just have very, very professional. All of y'all know how to do the professional costume show and the whole, choreography that goes with that, and show up very professional, very prepared with very good questions to make the bill better. I think you will see that most lawmakers would be very receptive to that. And then be very recognizing where there's overlap in goals, where I call it the Venn diagram overlaps, and acknowledge that. Because I'm not that much that way, but I would say that most politicians want to come from a place of agreement and improvement versus I hate this idea and I'm going to try to mess it up or kill the idea. So if their name is on it for some reason, they think that it's a good idea. So I think young people could really make some of our bills better. I think y'all can make our policies better, the ones that are going to get passed. And I think that's a missed opportunity sometimes, especially in Oklahoma when everything just looks so horrific that how could you even, find any element of improving anything? But there's a lot of stuff that's just kind of dry, like people just don't notice it. It's a lot of child advocacy stuff, school stuff. Vaping is a big one that young people really cared a lot about. And I think there was a big intersection between there's the cell phone thing. I've heard from young people about cell phones, like, I wish the bill would have done this. I liked that we have less cell phones in our schools because I can concentrate more, but I wish that they did this. And I think those are opportunities that young people have to make bills better and bring that unique perspective in a professional way.
Thank you all for your answers. Really appreciate that. I just want to remind everybody who is viewing, if you have any questions you would like to ask the panelists, please drop them into the chat and we will get to them as they come in. So our next question is directed to Gina Nelson and John Croissant. So what are some of the lessons that you're learning on the campaign trail, particularly after having spoken to young constituents from the 1st and 5th districts?
So some of the lessons that I have learned is that I think that there is a real passion that's happening right now that I haven't seen in a lot of election cycles really previously. People are fired up. I spoke about this 13-year-old that I met in Guthrie that came to one of my town halls. And, I'm seeing more and more young people come to my town halls and ask these questions. And he's fired up. He's fired up about, what are you going to do to maintain the separation of church and state at the federal level? And these are questions you wouldn't think about that young people would really care about, but they do. And I think that the audience was shocked. I really wasn't shocked because I've been, I was a teacher and I was asked just about everything you can imagine in the whole world. But what they are also they are also fired up about the fact that they are seeing more and more of their rights being taken away without them being part of the discussion. So whether it is laws at the state level or at the federal level, they feel like that they are now losing their voice and their choice. And so now they want to get more involved. And just like I met a group of folks that they're young people. They're in Francis Tuttle. They're studying healthcare, and they're scared to death right now because of all of the cuts that could happen to Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security. Why? Not because it affects them directly right now, but because they are working with the elderly right now in nursing homes, in home health situations, and they know that that affects the people that they care about, and it is going to affect their livelihood. And so many young people this week, of course, reaching out to me because of the fact that the Department of Education at the federal level has said that educators, you're not going to be a professional. Well, what about the people that are in college right now studying to be teachers and nurses and social workers? All of a sudden, politics is affecting them. A lot of times I think that people think, oh, I'll wait till I get 18. But the thing is that right now, and I will tell everybody this, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And young people know that they are on the menu, and so is the world that they care about.
And District 1, I think it sounds like we're having the same conversations, Gina. and again, it's young people. Number one, you have to go where they are. I think, I have several people on my campaign that are at the University of Tulsa. And so we connected with them to make sure that their University of Tulsa Young Dems was doing well. And we helped them to get started back up. We connected them with Tulsa Young Democrats, and we actually had a forum. We brought in the Democratic candidates and came to them so that we could hear from them. Going to pride parades, going to schools, going to places throughout the community. I think it's important. But once I do hear from them, I hear that the problems they're having are difficult conversations that adults are having too, about how to pay for things, about could they ever buy a house, about, should they stay in college or should they just go get into the workforce because they can't afford the debt that they're going to have. They're having to make the same tough decisions about taking care of their brothers and sisters, and about what our future is going to be. And I've heard this from several of you. They care about injustice, both in the United States and abroad. So they're talking about the issues in Ukraine and Palestine. They're talking about injustices that are happening here in Oklahoma, but also throughout the US. And so when I listen to them, their problems are the same problems that everyone else is facing right now. That's another healthcare issue going down the street, sorry, across from St. John's Hospital. But again, they're having the same kind of problems that everyone else is having, and they want to be a part of that solution. And so I'm excited to be able to hear from them because they have answers, and they want to have the tough conversations. And the other part of it is that education isn't just something that you get in school. They want to learn about how things work from us. They don't just want to be told that this is what they need to be for or against. They want to have the tough conversations, educate themselves, and learn the process, and then share that with their friends. And so I'm hearing from young people, and I'm learning from them just as much as they're learning from me. And as long as we're about education, sounds like Gina's doing the same thing. I know the Oklahoma Democratic Party, this is one of the biggest things they're doing right now. Just going out and knocking on doors and asking people, what are you concerned about? Not vote for us, not give us money, not anything other than, hey, what are you concerned about? What can we learn from you so we can go be able to represent you in the next campaign cycle? That's what we've got to be asking people, and that's how we're going to help Whether it's young voters or older voters, they want to know what's going on and how it's going to impact them and what we can do to fix it.
Throw in one thing that we're doing. We did talk about voter registration and the limits of it. Typically, we'll put voter registration forms out at events, and then we'll register people who show up. But this year, we're starting an initiative to use data to identify people who have never been asked to vote before. And we're going to be looking for 13,000 new voters, many of them based on figures like they're attending a community college. We're going to get out and ask young people to register to vote because we believe that that's not a chore, it's empowerment when we ask people to participate in making decisions about their lives. And that just goes back to the thing that we need to be in more spaces where young people are.
Amazing. My next question is for Thomas and Ryan. I'll just make it easy and say Ryan has to go first. I think that's the right alphabetical order. So my question to you both is, what moment made you feel that politics wasn't optional? And also, how did personal experiences in Oklahoma schools, workplaces, communities, or maybe in your own families shape that decision?
Yeah, so I grew up queer and Jewish in Oklahoma, so I think we can probably end it there. But I think much of so I do have a confession because everyone knows like me as a very democratic individual is I at one point in my life was very, very Republican, very, very deeply conservative. But I got involved in politics because my father was blind and disabled, and my town didn't have any public transportation, didn't have accessible crosswalks, didn't have anything. So because of that, 10-year-old me was emailing our city council asking, why do we not have any of these things? And they responded back being like, that's very sweet that you're asking. No. So that kind of really got me involved in politics. And originally I was very, very conservative because everyone around me was. And then I realized the reason I got involved in politics for me was because I cared about people. And I realized the people I was supporting and was on the side of did not care about people. So then that's why I made the transition I did and how I realized politics was not optional for me because so many of our communities in Oklahoma are suffering. And I genuinely believe Oklahomans are one of the like groups of people that have faced the highest childhood diversity in the country. So I think a lot of that determines like how Oklahomans view a lot of people, our community, and explains a lot of our voting habits.
Yeah. So, coming from I've been very fortunate. Look, there have been challenges, but it's nothing as concrete as I see within our community today. And so, coming from a Hispanic background, I have already seen like the dangerous rhetoric used by people like our president, and so that's kind of what got me involved. People on the local level too, ex-superintendent Ryan Walters and his rhetoric towards my community, and then seeing how the math didn't add up, given the fact that we currently are 49th in education. I'm seeing that while I'm fortunate, a lot of my friends, my family members, and the people around me aren't as fortunate. And so I want to be a voice for them. And I want to increase that representation that we were talking about. But to have representation, we have to have participation. And so going and speaking at your super state board of education meetings like I have, yeah, 50th under Ryan Walters now, but going and speaking your opinion, voicing what you care about, emailing your legislators, and just getting involved is important. And it's kind of what got me involved. So those experiences and the fact that we must do better is what pushes me every day.
Thank you both for that. It's always great to hear about how, youth voices are finding themselves getting involved. My next question is for Senator Senator Boren, Representative Deck, and Ryan. My question is, how can leaders ensure that youth engagement isn't just concentrated in Oklahoma City and Tulsa? So what can we do to reach rural young people?
I think one thing that we need to remember is that in Oklahoma, we have a unique opportunity because we are the state with the most Native Americans and the most tribes in our state. And our tribes are situated in rural areas predominantly. If you look at where the Cheyenne Arapaho tribe headquarters is, it's in close proximity to rural Oklahoma. If you look at the Kiowa Nation, they're out by Hobart. If you look at the Choctaw Nation, is down in Durant. And what we learned with the rural schools and like the voucher issue, the intersection between the viability of our rural schools and tribes they overlap greatly. And so I do think that leveraging that, tribes have really good facilities, they have great meeting places. They're they're fine with people coming and meeting and convening around making their communities better. So having more events and more activities around those tribal locations at their meeting rooms and their civic centers and the different places that they have to meet, I think is a really neat opportunity. We also have a lot of 2-year colleges and 4-year colleges throughout the state. In Altus, Oklahoma, there's WOSC. It's Western Oklahoma State College, and there are students down there that care deeply about their future, and they're needing to have the opportunity to engage. So even if we just covered and then we have career tech centers out throughout the state, out in the rural areas where you have a lot of young people that are learning trades. And then we have our apprenticeship programs where those are the union jobs that young people are learning how to work in, and they each have headquarters throughout the state too. So there's natural places that are already out there that we can reach out to and convene. We know it's easy to do the mailers or the list or to do the things through college newspapers or local newspapers. Southwest Ledger is a rural newspaper. So if we had more events down in those areas where young people got to meet with other young leaders and got to meet with politicians or other elected leaders, I really think that would help us kind of stimulate those areas and find out who those young people are that care. They'll show up to the meeting, and then from there, they can start mobilizing and inviting the young people in their communities. And also you have FFA and you have, public schools are all down in those areas as well. And there's, AP teachers in government, AP teachers in English, that they know which student leaders they have that are engaged and care a lot. And they could recommend people that would be interested in a fellowship or an internship or the opportunity to learn a particular skill at the Capitol or be invited to something at the Capitol.
Yeah, I'll go next. Yeah, I was actually gonna, and Mary kind of touched on this. I would say there's actually a lot of opportunity in rural Oklahoma if a young person knows where to look or if they end up in a particular program. I'm an FFA kid. So FFA, for those who are not familiar, used to be referred to as Future Farmers of America. And the amount of learning opportunities for leadership, for public speaking, for parliamentary procedure and debate, are really unmatched, and truly teach a style. I mean, I would call it like a populist style of um, of just being engaged with the general public, and so and 4-H as well. I can tell you right now, in the Oklahoma House of Representatives, we have a solid chunk, if not a majority, of our state representatives in Oklahoma were either FFA or 4-H kids.
I was in 4-H.
Yeah. And, and several folks that I've worked in, campaigns with over the years came out of the 4-H program, as a matter of fact. And so it's really an interesting dynamic. And those opportunities are just limitless. It felt like growing up. We had the Made for Excellence conference every year, which was a leadership's conference. We had a DC trip that you could take, and it wasn't as well as state and national conventions where you could participate in public speaking, parliamentary procedure, debate, etc. And in fact, the Oklahoma Speaker of the House it was the national champion in FFA extemporaneous speaking when he was a senior in high school. And so for me, I actually see it as rural Oklahoma has more opportunity because the per capita opportunity is there to get involved. In small communities, I lived 38 years of my life in an entire county that was less than 30,000 people. It was a county had 7 different communities and less than 30,000 people combined. And my state representative came to almost every high school event that I was a part of. Whereas here in Norman, I only represent 1/3 of the community, and we're not even a metropolitan area. We're just an incredibly large exurb at about 130,000. And so I represent about 1/3 of the community. I don't get invited to half the things that go on. There are more events than there's more supply than they have demand for a state rep to attend. Mary, who is my state senator, will tell you, I mean, there are more events on campus than we could ever go to. And so they don't think about us as much as the smaller community does. And smaller communities have a higher expectation of attendance to community events than a larger community. And so I actually think that being from a smaller community, you have more natural exposure to the process and to the people that are in the process, just because of the logistics of those communities.
So, unfortunately, I cannot comment anything on FFA. I graduated from a high school of 636 people in the middle of an urban area. That FFA was not a big thing there. However, I did go to college at a teeny tiny college in rural Oklahoma of about 850 students. And the majority of the students that that university serves, USAO down in Chickasha, Go Drovers, is that a lot of students were tribal. A lot of students were Kiowa, Chickasaw. I met quite a few Comanche students. Also, a lot of students were from rural Oklahoma and were first generation students. So something I really do want to emphasize is that there's not, in my perspective, rural universities and VOTEX do not have the resources that urban universities like OU or OSU or even TU do to get students involved locally, or even to get students to like visit the state capitol. For example, in the entire 4 years that I did college Democrats and did like collegiate organizing, I had people constantly ask me like, "Oh, are you from OU? Are you from OSU? Can I pass something on to the OU or OSU college Dems through you?" I'm like, "I'm not from either of those universities." We have the expectation that that's where the majority of our students go, especially the majority of our liberal leaning students. But 2 of our most successful chapters for college Democrats was Rogers State University and University of Science and Arts of Oklahoma, which is my alma mater. And I always say that's because those universities, that was all they had. So that they put their everything into those chapters because they didn't have the resources. So I think there is tremendous opportunity to invest in rural Oklahoma. I will say I'm glad that Senator Bourne and Representative Deck bring up FFA and everything, because I've noticed sometimes Democrats feel, especially on the national level, get wary about talking to rural voters, and talking about like agriculture and everything, which we shouldn't be, because those people are working class people who still have the same concerns and oftentimes same values that we do, but they just don't get reached out to. So I think a lot of it is just helping provide those educational resources, the actual resources people need to, like, for instance, make trips up to the Capitol, get involved. But also, people aren't connecting or reaching out to those people. Every single resource I brought to my university was something I had to reach out and had to find myself. And I know that's very daunting for a lot of students. So I think it's about making an effort and a game plan to be able to do that and make it inclusive of everyone in Oklahoma. Because let me tell you, those folks at Panhandle State University, they don't have folks reaching out to them. So I think it just kind of requires strategic thinking and actually making the effort to do so.
Thank you guys for your answers. I really appreciate that focus on rural voters and young not yet voters, because that is a large demographic in our state. All right, I'm going to turn to another question that's in the chat, and for the sake of preserving our time, maybe let's just hear from one or two of you on this question. All right, so this question comes from John. I'll just read his statement directly. He said this was to draw on Gina's earlier statement, but if we could have discussions where we could ask questions like, what do you think about standardized tests? Or what do you think about the Oklahoma Competes claim that AI for third graders can solve reading problems? Gina, would you like to have any comment on John's statement?
Very quickly before the responses, I just want to make a comment. I sincerely hope we don't get kicked out of the Zoom at 8 p.m. I would like to push on with the final questions, but if that happens, apologies. I hope it won't, though. We're at the final few questions. Please go ahead.
Wrap this up really quickly. State testing is an absolute sham. It is a billion-dollar industry in order to push the privatization scam. And what was the second part about third graders? Give me that real quick, Bianca. I'm sorry, you're on mute, boo.
AI to help students, third graders, pass the reading test.
Let me tell you something. No, we need to, I'm going to go up there to DC and start doing some regulation on AI, because what we need to do is invest more in teachers that can do RTI, that can do the things that they need to do in the classroom, that can teach phonics. And we don't need AI. There's enough problems with AI. That's a whole nother question. Mic drop, Gina's out.
Great. Very quickly, as some of you may know, my biggest topic of interest is mis and disinformation online. And I do want to get Representative Waldron's thoughts on this. How do we address online disinformation targeting youth, especially in Oklahoma, as it can be a bit different and unique compared to other places?
Well, you finally asked the question that's right in my wheelhouse as one of the first Oklahoma politicians to be the subject of a deep fake attack. And I just want to say that I'm less worried about deep fakes affecting young people, because younger people are more apt to see what's going on. My son listened to the audio fake that they made, and he said, "That's terrible, Father," and he made a better one very quickly. It was older voters that I was really concerned about when they heard this voice purporting to be mine, that they wouldn't understand the way technology is changing. So I think young people are probably going to be savvier about that, but they're also going to be bombarded with a constantly mutating environment where truth is very plastic, and they'll have to try to understand it for themselves. We probably need good laws and guidance on how to sort out misinformation. But it is also going to be a question of constant engagement with people. You're going to be more susceptible to misinformation about a politician you don't know much about. And politicians are going to have to work very hard to remain authentic and to communicate with people so that voters can tell what sounds like them and what doesn't sound like them. And anyone who's heard that deepfake will know that I wasn't raised in Western Oklahoma, so I don't quite have that twang to my voice. They're going to get more sophisticated. It's going to become more problematic. And I suspect, though, that young people are going to adapt and better understand the information and misinformation environment they're in. That's my hope, anyway. But it's a very daunting question. How can we practice democracy if we can't agree on the truth?
Thank you. It's nice to hear some hope whenever we talk about this. I just wanted to make a quick comment. I'm a bit afraid that we might get kicked out soon. We may not. It may let us go over 8 p.m. So for the rest of the audience questions, I'm going to drop our email in the chat. Oh, well, I don't know if I can spell it. Please email us your questions, and I will make sure to forward it on to the panelists. And if you'd like, we can even post it publicly. I think that would be better just to keep the conversation going. So I'm just going to drop that in there. And while I do that, I would like to ask this question to any of the panelists who would like to contribute before we go on to the final two. This question is, we know a lot of young people are excited to run for office in the future. Maybe they've thought about it. What is some advice you have for these future leaders, and what are some resources they can use?
I think it's very, very important to work on campaigns if you're thinking about running. A lot of the skills are experientially learned. It'll save you a lot of money. It'll save you a lot of heartache when you cannot just go out, and our consultants are very helpful, but you don't go buy a restaurant and just turn it all over to a manager and come check in. So you have to start with washing dishes and work your way up to, cooking on the grill in order to own and run a restaurant. Also, the other thing about working on campaigns, especially in or running for office, if you're going to run for office in a region, let's say you want to, my son lives in Aurora, Colorado. If you want to run for office in Aurora, Colorado, you need to know the people that are actually in the apparatus that have gotten people elected to city council, who've gotten people elected to school board, who've gotten people elected to state rep, Senate, Congress, governor. Because if you don't know those people, then that's the pipeline of people that you need to be helping with your campaign. So you absolutely have to help out on I'd say anywhere between 2 to 10 campaigns before you're ready to run for your own office, because that's how you're going to meet the people in the community. And it's also how you know who's helping you and who's more of a drama queen or drama person that, talks a good game, but they're not really helpful. And that's what you learn by helping out on other campaigns.
And I would join in because I've run at state. I'm on the Tulsa School Board. I'm running for U.S. Congress. I would say, don't be afraid to jump into a race that's open. Don't run against someone that you already believe in. Like what Mary was saying, go support that person. If there's already somebody that's in that office that you like, don't run against somebody that you already agree with. Go help them and learn something, but don't be afraid to get in a race and maybe not win the first time. I didn't win the first time. John and I both ran Waldron in 2016. I ran as a Republican for State House. John ran against Dave Rader for Oklahoma Senate. Both of us are in office now. Both of us are making, have great opportunities to change things here in Oklahoma for a lot of constituents. And so, don't be afraid to jump into a school board race at the local level. Don't be afraid, to get into a state house race, because there's nobody that's put their name in. And you know what? You can do just as good a job as anybody else, but you've got to listen and get support. I ran the first time with no campaign manager. My family helped me, and I made a lot of mistakes. Listen to the people that have done it. Go to John Waldron. Go to your local county party. there are a lot of people that are willing to give you support. And one thing I've noticed in the Democratic Party is that we want to help you. Like we're not running against each other in most races. We're running to help change things for Oklahomans. And so even like the people running, if you're running against me and you're a Democrat, I'm not running against you. I'm running to help support Oklahomans. I'm running to make sure that we have different representation than what's in Washington or in Oklahoma City or here in Tulsa right now. And so if you want to get involved, go get involved with a campaign or jump into a race, but don't be afraid to come ask us, and we will be more than happy to help. And I know John Waldron will plug you in with somebody that is going to help you win that race.
Dropping a link into the chat as we.
I have slightly different advice. Not necessarily from these folks, but from what you generally hear on these types of conversations. If you're a young person and you want to one day run for office, I suggest you figure out what your education and career path is first. Find a profession, find a job. I ran for office whenever I was in my 20s, and I'm really grateful that I lost, because I am so much better at it today than I would have been then. I have so much more life experience. I bring so much more to the table from my caucus mates because of what I have today. And that's not to discourage anybody from running, but it is more about you have got to find your path in life, and it can't just be politics. Because if, I like to say everybody who does this, we all have something like internally wrong with us from childhood that makes us believe we belong in the rooms where decisions are made for a lot of other people. And there's nothing wrong with that unless you're using this as a way to work through that. And this is not the place to do that. The worst people in politics, especially in public office, are the ones who are using politics to run from their trauma instead of dealing with it head on. And, 95%, if not more, of what we vote on in the state legislature are not the issues that you stay up late in the dorm in college debating with your dorm mates. It's just not. We rarely vote on abortion. We rarely vote on queer and gender issues. And I mean, it's like maybe once or twice out of 3,000 votes. We rarely vote on these hot button issues. You know what we do vote on? We vote on easements for utility cables that are underground or above ground. We vote on how deep different oil wells have to be. We vote on how a mortgage loan is worded. We vote on all of these daily items that when I was 28 years old, I didn't know anything about. And so I encourage people to get involved, but understand that, like, for me, when somebody wants to run and go to work with me every day, I want them to bring something to the table that I don't, so I can learn from them, and vice versa, right? Because it should really be a team. And it doesn't mean, I mean, we have some amazing young people in our caucus. Representative Arturo Alonso Sandoval probably has the highest IQ in our caucus, and he's 25 or 26. But so he's incredible, right? And he does bring a lot to the table. But I can tell you that, like, it, you need to be able to find your own path outside of politics in case the run for office isn't in your path. Find a career, something you're passionate about, something that pays the bills. Because as someone who is a long 20-year campaign organizer, I can tell you this ain't it.
Throw in there that when you do run, you're running based on your life, your relationships, your experience, your professional connections, and the skill set that you've acquired. So think about that. The damnable thing about politics is that it puts your whole life on display, and puts it all on the scales. So think about that. Politics might be a second act for you, but what you do in the first act is very important.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I'll touch back on that um um well, I think I just lost my thought. I had it. John, you just said something and it hit me.
Skill set, relationships, your life
Yeah,
experiences, your life on
yeah.
display.
Oh yeah, I know. Campaigns are a pressure cooker. That's what it is. And it will not make you into a better person. It will only show the person that you really are. So you have to be prepared for that level of stress. And you have to be healthy mentally, emotionally, and ready for that process.
You were responding to my line about the damnable thing about politics.
Yeah.
Also, I dropped in the chat my stalwart viewpoints on setbacks and easements in case anybody's interested.
All right, for our next question, this is directed to all of our panelists. It's one of our last questions to wrap us up here. Looking ahead for in 5 years in the future, what would meaningful progress in youth civic engagement look like for Oklahoma, and what will it take to get there?
And again, to make it easier for everyone, we can go alphabetical order, which I'm trying to figure it out. So we can start with Senator Mary Boyd.
I think having different age showing up on election day. So that means having young people registered to vote, more young people registering people to vote, and then more and seeing a plot graph where the average age of an Oklahoma voter is going down. That's what I see as successful in Oklahoma, is who shows up on election day.
All right, a challenge for you. One thing I would really love to see is a college student run for school board and actively encourage votes from the high school seniors in that district. Imagine a school board member who was elected by the students actually in the school whose policies they'd be affecting. I think that'd be pretty incredible.
And I think Mary said it great. I think we've got the lowest voter turnout in the entire nation. And I think if we're seeing young people represented at higher numbers, that percentage, if we can increase that, I think it will make a huge difference, because honestly, right now elections are being made by about 25% or less. 94% of our elections in Oklahoma, John, are they unopposed? Is that right?
Last year, 1 out of 3 legislative seats was challenged. We've lined up candidates for 2 out of 3 right now.
And so I think in 5 years, what we should see is that there should be young people, not only running for office and voting, but we need to have a higher just overall engagement in the state. And I think, just to plug, 836 would be one way to help do that. Open primaries allows people to be able to be engaged in that primary process on both sides, whether they're a Republican, a Democrat, or an independent.
I'll give you a visual, but I'm going to use the PG rated version. Some of you have seen this before. There are 4 million Oklahomans, 3 million of whom are eligible to vote, 2 million who are registered to vote, and only 1 million who are typically voting in elections. And if you weren't recording it, this would not be the finger I'd be using.
Don't get us into trouble. Joking.
Love to see two things happen. So one, yes, everything that we've talked about, and we've got all the planning and everything. It's like prom at this point. Yes, we can go and get the shoes and the dress, and you guys can get the tuxedo, but if we don't show up and dance, it doesn't matter. We have to show up to the big dance. We've got to go to prom and we got to dance. So it means you've got to vote, and you've got to keep voting, and you've got to keep bringing more people to the dance. The second thing is that you talked about 5 years down the road. I'm even thinking about 1 year down the road. It's the fact that I'm running for Congress. And if I win during that cycle, I will be 48 years old. And that should not be one of the youngest members of Congress. But when I looked at it statistically, I would be one of the younger members of Congress. So what I want to see is the fact that that number is actually either one of the higher or the mid range, and we have more young people that are bringing their ideas and their energy, yes, to higher office, because nothing is going to change and no one is going to, bring these new ideas unless we stop treating Congress like a nursing home. So that's what I want to see.
So I'll
You're gonna
say,
defeat your
obviously,
claim that you're 28, Gina. I don't buy it. That you're 48. No, I think, yeah. No,
Oh,
I don't buy it.
no, no, no.
48? No way.
Listen, I am almost 50 and my hairdresser is amazing. And he also makes sure he hands out voter registration to every client.
so I think I'm just going to echo the sentiment that everyone else said regarding if youth voter turnout can go up, if more young people decide to run for office. There is this great organization called Run for Something that helps people under the age of 35 run for office, helps provide resources for those people. I think the biggest changes I want to see is not more young people running for Congress or running for state house or running for whatever office like looks cool and flashy. But genuinely, we just need more people with a variety of experiences on school boards, on city council, because like school board in my from the high school I graduated from my school district, they're all above the age of 55. They're here talking about issues around like technology use and AI and everything in schools, and they did not grow up with it. They don't know what that's about. So, and that's not their fault. They do their best to educate themselves, but it's just they don't have that lived experience. So I think there's a lot of ways to measure success of organizing young people, and honestly, I'm ready for any of it. So let's bring it on in 2026.
I'll go. I think it's kind of what Gina mentioned, but for me, it's reducing the age of the average legislator in Oklahoma. I think we need more young people making decisions, and I think it's time for a significant majority of the people representing us now to go home and retire.
Believe that was everyone. Thank you very much. I do have to say I wrote down Gina's quote, "We have to show up to the big dance." And I think I'm going to pin it on my board right here to remind myself. That's a great quote. Um, final question. And again, this overlaps with some of the previous questions. But whatever is on the top of your mind right now. And the question originally was, because of the theme of this event, if every young person in Oklahoma took one civic action this year, what should it be and why? But I want to also give an option to just, every person. So however you want to take that question, if you want to focus on the young people and students, what they could specifically do, or just one person in Oklahoma, someone who's on this call, what can one person do this year that can help us achieve some of the things we spoke about? Can start with Representative Deck. I believe we can start with you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I'm gonna hop off of this right after my response, but thank you all so much for having me, and I've enjoyed this conversation and happy to keep in touch afterwards. Not to harp too much on the campaign side, but I would say go knock a door for a candidate or for a ballot initiative or a petition. Go knock some doors. There is a grand humility in meeting someone where they are, asking them how they feel about government and life in general, listening to them, hearing them out, and then asking them for a vote. It is it is something that to me, like I always say, if the candidate for office doesn't respect the voter enough to go ask for their vote, then they don't deserve it. But really taking that opportunity to listen to people, people will surprise you. People will, and sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes it's not such a great thing. But just honestly, just listening, because what happens in the majority of political conversations and organizations is there's lots of conversations going on about voters, and they're all going on without the voters. And so if you could do one thing this year, go knock some doors, listen to some voters, and see how they feel about the state of things and the state of their life and their well-being. And I think that it's just an unmistakable experience and irreplaceable. And to me, it is the baseline of the humble experience that is our grand American government experiment.
Before anyone else goes, I want to say thank you since you have to hop off the call. We appreciate you being here. Do I need to call on someone?
I'll do it.
Great.
And thank you, Delnaz and Bianca. You guys have done great in putting this together, and just overall, it's been very, very a great conversation. To me, vote in every election in 2026. You know what? Too many people show up just for a presidential election where they have the least amount of say. Go vote in a school bond election. Vote in your school board, city council, mayoral, county, state, all of them. Make sure you show up in the primary and the general, because in the end, we're not just not showing up at those big federal elections. We're not showing up at any elections. I mean, I had people that I worked with on the school board that had only won out of 40,000 votes, less than 200 votes to be on a school board twice. We need people to show up and vote in every single election. And that means you need to know when those elections are. And it's out there. It's not go to your local county election board. But then the other thing is learn about who is running. Read about what the bond issue is about. Get some information before you show up at the polls. But if you can vote in every election, that will make a huge difference.
I'll go next, and what I will say is cultivate relationships with people. The best way to get people to vote, to knock doors, to do anything is, they're your friends, so they want to hang out with you. Whenever I was in college Dems and we went out and knocked doors, like we went out for lunch afterwards to like a Chili's and had a lot of fun. I, you know, Nothing is better in my experience than discussing like the craziest person you had on the door over a margarita. And then for Thomas, you have to wait a couple of years. I'm sorry, but but you'll have that experience and it'll be awesome. So you have to find ways to make things like this fun. I mean, organizing, voting, all that stuff, it's not inherently fun. But you have to find a way to make that something people will enjoy. So I used to carpool my friends to go vote, and I would give them total control over my aux cord, and I regretted that on multiple occasions, but it was fun. So whatever you're doing, making these mundane tasks still contribute to cultivating a relationship, I think is very important.
I'll add one. Go on okhouse.org and watch one session of the Oklahoma House, or give a nod to Senator Bourne, the Senate at oksenate.gov. Go watch one committee meeting, go watch one floor session, and watch the discussion. I'll throw in this anecdote. I once had an issue on the floor that was influenced by a homeschool kid that had been following the stuff that we were doing sent me a message, and I was like, "Good question." And 30 seconds after that kid posed the question to me, I was asking it on the house floor. So yeah, get involved. It's easy to do. You can see the media function allows you to see the live proceedings of your state government at work. So go watch it, get involved, and maybe that'll get you interested in the next step.
I think my one action item would be to register 3 voters. And then once you do that, go register 6 voters and then register 12. And if you do that, you will have registered almost 20 voters. And if every active concerned person in Oklahoma registered 20 voters, we would have a whole different outcome in our elections, because those that are actively voting would change. So that's what I would say is get comfortable registering voters, set a goal, and meet it. Find other people that'll do it with you. Go to trainings to register voters. There's tons of them out there. Just get it good at registering voters.
My advice would be get out of your echo chambers and get out of your algorithms. Go out and start talking to people that think differently than you. Because right now, whether we have Reuters or red pills or we've got far left or anything, we're all just screaming at each other in a vacuum. Get out and talk to people in person. It is hard to hate someone up close. And as someone who is out there doing lots of town halls, and if you're interested, you can go to GinaNelson.com and find out when my next town hall is. And you're talking to people that are from all different political backgrounds. The one thing is that once we start having a conversation and getting offline, we can find solutions and find little ways that we can connect. So get out of those algorithms, get out of your echo chamber, and start talking with real people.
Gina, where do you need to go to find Stephanie Bice's next town hall?
Whoknows.com. Nevershowsup.com. Where's she at.com. Hashtag where's Waldo and Stephanie.
She's hanging out with Kevin Hurd, unfortunately.
I feel a little targeted by the Where's Waldo one, though.
For me, I think more people need to call other people out. Yeah, where's Stephanie? Where's I think calling people out, if you have a friend who's not registered, call them out and get them to register. If you see people spreading propaganda, call them out. Post on your Instagram story. I think that's one of the most important things. If there's an event and you want people to go and you think it's important for people to be there, post it on your story. If you have information on how you can get registered to vote, post it on your story. If you have information on what's going on in government, post it on your story. I think calling people out and getting people informed is really important. And for us to make change, people have to understand what's going on.
Excellent thoughts from everyone. Quick comments. I love the Instagram story comment you made, Thomas. I speak a lot about how social media can be harmful, but genuinely some of the very important and time-sensitive things I see are on people's Instagram stories. Probably yours, Thomas, if I'm being honest. And then you also mentioned calling people out when they post certain things, like say, for example, someone posts something false. And what I mentioned to students who I spoke to is you don't necessarily have to just like repost the false thing. You can just create a post that says, make sure you look out for these signs of, a false claim because I saw something recently. Here are the, signs. But yeah, great comments from everybody. I want to thank everyone so much for joining, and panelists at the very end, if you could hang back for 2 minutes, that would be wonderful. I want to thank Voters of Tomorrow because they supported us and creating our chapter, I always mention. Ashley, who's not on the call now, is the chapter's director, and she made this all possible. And I want to thank all the attendees who joined on. I know we went over time by almost 30 minutes, and the panelists as well. I know you all are so busy, so thank you so much for staying on and having this very important discussion with us. And I'm just going to turn over to Bianca for a comment as well.
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to add on to what Thomas was saying about getting engaged with your network when it comes to being online. I think a lot of times as civically engaged people, like anyone who's in the chat is, or, you know, us on this panel, it's easy to forget that we are often seen as leaders in our community when it comes to being civically engaged. I know many instances I've had where friends and family have reached out to me because of something I posted on my Instagram story or something like that about, oh, how do I, you know, get my mail-in ballot, or how do I register to vote? And things that I wouldn't have thought someone might come to me for, by providing an avenue for them to do so has, you know, given them the opportunity to reach out. So I would say, like, anybody who feels like they might not be empowered to be a leader, you're a leader to your family members, to your friends, to your community, because, you know, you are civically engaged and people look to you to help lead their way towards becoming more civically engaged citizens.
Beautiful comment, and I'm glad you mentioned that, Bianca, because I think a lot of people on the call, both panelists and attendees, can benefit from hearing that. I certainly can. So thank you for the reminder. And yeah, so as I was saying before, I'm so grateful to everybody on this call, attendee, panelist, and my fellow moderator, Bianca. Yeah, have a great rest of your evenings. And I did drop the email in the chat earlier. It is oklahoma@votersoftomorrow.org. So please email us any further questions you may have, and we can get you connected and forward that on. Thank you, Bianca. She just dropped it in there again. And with that, I'm going to say goodbye to all of our wonderful attendees, and I will ask the panelists to stay on for 2 more minutes. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a wonderful night.
Thank you all for joining.
Ready.